Hey, Dave Sedia here. So I thought it'd be fun to try working through the Svelte tutorial together. And so for context, I'm primarily a React developer. I've been working with React for the last maybe 5 or so years, and been playing with Svelte kind of off and on sporadically for the last year or so. Um, but I know a lot of people are interested in Svelte and maybe just haven't had time to check it out yet. So I thought if we go through the tutorial, you can get an idea of kind of the flavor of how it works and maybe how it compares to React a little bit. Um, and I can kind of talk through the differences as we go through the tutorial. So I've got the Svelte tutorial up here. You can follow along at svelte.dev/tutorial. And they've got this drop-down list of like a ton of things. We'll see how far we get with this. Kind of broken down into little features. And each feature has its own instructions and kind of like a little exercise to do. So let me full screen this so we get a little more space. So this is just the intro saying hello world. We can change stuff here and it redraws immediately. And this is just regular HTML. So we can put stuff in here. Say like grab an EM tag around world. And we get that. So behind the scenes, Svelte is compiling this. And real time, like re-rendering this component here. So like they say, we need to know some HTML and CSS and JavaScript, because that's pretty much the building blocks of Svelte. So this is a single component. We'll jump into the next tutorial here. So let's add some interactivity. So reset it for us to hello world. And we're going to make a script tag. And inside the script tag is regular JavaScript. So we can say let name equals world. And then replace world with curly braces around name. And then we get that here. And we can also do like follow its directions here and give it to uppercase. And you can see as I'm typing there, it's like evaluating this to like, hey, this name.toUpper is undefined, and that's what it's rendering here. But once I get to uppercase and call it, then we get the string world. So inside curly braces, this is similar to React. Inside curly braces, you can run JavaScript expressions and it'll evaluate them and put them in line. And everything that you define in the script is like in scope in your template down here. Let's go on to the next one. So dynamic attributes, we can add a source to our image here. So we're also getting this warning we'll talk about in a second, but we can set the source equal to the source variable here, and we get our dancing guy here. And we also get this accessibility warning that we don't have an alt attribute, which is kind of helpful. So we can add an alt dancing guy. And that'll make sure our image is nice and accessible for screen readers. And the shorthand thing is also really cool. So this is pretty similar to React, where you can, set a prop equal to some value in curly braces. And this is like a JavaScript expression, can refer to variables and whatever. But Svelte also lets you just pass the curly braces like this. And if the name matches the prop name, then it's equivalent. So it's like a nice shorthand for those common cases where you want to pass in like the prop equals the value. Okay, so styling. So Svelte components are pretty much just HTML documents. We've got style tags and script tags, and everything else is templates. Everything else is HTML. Actually, unlike React, you don't have to have like a single root element. You can have multiple things here. Hello div, line 3. And this works fine. So Svelte will figure it out, and you can just kind of have this at the root. And actually, like sort of the core, I guess like the basic state of a Svelte component without a script tag, like you can just have regular HTML, and this is perfectly fine. So if you have simple components that don't actually have much interactivity, they can be as easy as like as simple as just HTML. But so here we're doing some styling. I'll get rid of this stuff. And we can add some styles here. Let's add a paragraph style. And we can say color purple. It says here, font family, Comic Sans. Why not? Font size 2M. There we go. We have our Comic Sans paragraph. Now, this is interesting. So the style rules are scoped to this specific component. So in regular HTML, if you just said, style the p tags with color purple and whatever, this will affect everything in the document. But with Svelte, it is adding some little when at compile time, it's adding some attribute at the end of this. So at compile time, it's adding an extra identifier to these tags. So if we inspect our rendered stuff down here, you can see it has a class of svelte-whatever, some random string. And this has our style in it. So this is how Svelte is able to, if you have two different components that refer to, that style p tags, the styles will be scoped to those components. And it is to the component. So if you have multiple of the same component, they will share, they will override each other, I guess, but they'd be the same. Anyway, yeah, so that's pretty cool. This is nice because if you just have simple, if a component is pretty small, then you don't have many of the same tag and stuff. You can just use the tag names here, and instead of having to come up with class names and stuff, it's nice to have things scoped like that. Okay, nested components. So we can't put everything in a single component. We can import things from other files. So in the REPL here, we've got files across the top. We've been in app.svelte, which is just kind of I think is the entry point for this thing here. If you're making your own, it doesn't have to be called app.svelte, but here we've got these two components now. So we can import stuff in a script tag. So if we, make a script, and here we can import nested from nested.svelte. And now we've got our component here, and now we can render it down below. So render out nested. Cool. This is another paragraph, and we can look at this and see what it's doing here. So this is pretty similar to React 2. If you're familiar with importing React components and rendering them, this works the same way. So one difference I think is that you can't have multiple components in a file in Svelte. So if you have, you've got some HTML and say you wanted to extract this out to a component real quick into const whatever above, outside of here in React, you could do that. You can have multiple components in one file. Maybe a list and its items or whatever. In Svelte, each component has to be its own file, as far as I know anyway. If that's not true, let me know, because it would be cool to be able to do multiples in one file. But as far as I know, you've got to make a new file. And luckily, there's not much boilerplate to that. You can just create the file and paste your stuff in. Not a lot of ceremony here, but that is a thing to be aware of. Okay, so for HTML tag, let's see. So strings are inserted as plain text. So this is good because it'll save you from cross-site scripting attacks. But if you want the raw HTML, if you want the thing to be parsed as HTML, you can use this special @HTML tag thing, and then it will insert this verbatim with the strong tags and everything. And then you are open to cross-site scripting attacks, so make sure you're not putting any of your user-defined content inside these things. I think in practice this is probably not used very often. React has that thing called, it's dangerously set inner HTML or something, and you set it to like some special object that has an HTML property or whatever. I forget how that works exactly. But anyway, Svelte is a little more streamlined for that. But it is kind of wonky looking. I don't think this like at syntax appears anywhere else that I can remember seeing. Maybe we'll run into something like that. But anyway, it looks kind of unique and should kind of like be a warning sign if you see this. Probably not something you should need very often. So let's see. What now? Now we're making an app, I guess. So we've been making components. And I guess this step is about how to make your own apps locally. This is pretty cool. So we can look into this later. I think. Yes, this is just telling you how the Svelte projects work. We've got an index.js file, kind of behind the scenes here, I guess, but in the generated files, we'll have index.js, or in the local projects. And they can import Svelte components and render them like this. But the rest of the tutorial doesn't really depend on this. So if you want to do local development, come back here and try this out. All right, so here's some fun stuff. Reactivity. This is kind of where it starts to diverge from React a bit, I think. So we are going to wire up this button to like count how many times it's clicked. And we're going to add an on click. We're going to call handle click. This is pretty React-y, right? React might be like on click like that. Svelte uses on colon click. All of the events are like that, on colon, whatever. And okay, so we can click this, doesn't break. And inside here, we can just say count plus equals 1. And we have a local variable called count. We're modifying it here. And Svelte is going to detect that we've changed a variable, and it's going to re-render all the parts of the template loops that used it. So you can click this and it increments. Pretty cool. It says Svelte instruments the assignment with some code that tells it the DOM needs to be updated. If we look at the JS output here, we can see like what Svelte actually compiled for this component. So Svelte is a compiler. It's taking your most frameworks have like React and Vue will have stuff that your components are kind of like run by the framework at runtime. Like the framework will execute them, and Svelte flips that on its head kind of, and so it compiles everything ahead of time into this JavaScript stuff. And so cool thing about that is that it can look at things like assignments and use those to reactively re-render things. So you can see the scroll bar is actually not very big for this is like the whole app. It's got a constructor, got some instance thing. And this instance is, this is actually the script tag. You can see like, here's our let count, here's our function. And here's our let count, here's the function. And the special thing is this $invalidate call. And it's doing the increment. And it's just, it knows that count has changed. And I think the 0 is maybe like some index into variable name or something. Not sure where that's coming from. But this is all Svelte is doing. This is how it's able to do things reactively. Let's look at some more examples of reactivity here. So I'm going to get rid of this JS output. So it's saying that Svelte automatically updates the DOM when your component state changes. So if we have, if we have computed properties that need to be computed from other parts, like this full name that's based on first name and last name, or I guess in this case, we're going to do a doubled count. So Svelte runs the script only once at startup time. So unlike React, where your component is constantly re-rendering, where React every time it re-renders, React recalls your JavaScript component function or class or whatever. Svelte is only running the script once, so there's kind of no reactivity that can happen there. You can't rely on it to get recalled, and so that's what this special $: thing. This is actually just like a JavaScript label. So $: doubled equals count times 2. And this is kind of like a declaration and a sign to watch for recompute this thing whenever any of the dependencies changes. So it's going to recompute doubled whenever count changes. And the rest of this is already wired up, so we can click this. And we want to print out our doubled though. So print out like doubled down here. We see it's 0. And we can see it's incrementing. And every time the count changes, doubled recomputes. Now, if we did this as a let, you can see that we're only, let doubled equal count times 2. This is only going to run once, and currently it's 0. And as we change this, it's not going to recompute. So that's why we need this $: thing. So if you have some reactive bits of state, things that variables that depend on other state that should recompute whenever state changes, then just use $: and we'll figure it out. Cool. Yeah, you can also just write count times 2 equals count times 2. That works too. But yeah, this is pretty cool. And you can do a little more with this too. I think they have some other examples of wrapping them in ifs and stuff. This is also awesome. So if you want to rerun, say like log out the count when it changes, throw a $: in front of the console log. So let's try this. $: console log count is now count. Count is now whatever. Now, I think that it depends on the fact that count is inside this string. If we just like count, say count changed. Not sure if that's going to re-render. Let's try it. Yeah, so it doesn't re-render this line because there are no, there's no variables on this line that have changed. So it's sort of surgical about how it does its re-rendering. It's only going to rerun these things when things on that line or in that block, like this thing, have changed. So we put the count back in here, and oops, we can see that it re-renders. Let's try like make another variable var2. It's like hi or whatever. Just put var2 in here. Yeah, so you can see the count is changing here, but it's not rerunning this line because var2 hasn't changed. So that's pretty cool. Yep, and we can do multiple, we can group things together with $: do this. And then I think it's going to rerun this if, it's going to rerun this whole block if anything changes. So we got changes. Let's render out the count here again. Cool. Now you can see it's running all of the lines in this block whenever any of the things inside the block have changed. So whenever count changes, we get the re-rendering. If we put var2 in here again, little high thing, then it probably won't re-render. Yeah. So it won't rerun this because var2 is not changing. Cool. Yep, you can also do $: in front of if blocks. Let's try that out. $: if count is greater than or equal to 10. We can alert count is dangerously high. and then set it back to 9. Kind of dangerous. Okay, 9. All right, it'll never let it get to 10. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so the reactivity I think is one of the big kind of like productivity boosts in Svelte, where like we don't have to manually kind of set state and keep it updated like with most of the frameworks. Um, all right, so yeah, updating arrays and objects. So I guess this is this makes sense. Let's talk about this. So Svelte, the reactivity is triggered by assignments. So equals, plus equals, things like that, will tell Svelte that it needs to re-render. But it doesn't magically know that like functions are going to mutate the thing. So if you like push a number on to numbers, Svelte can't tell. It doesn't know that push is going to modify the array. And I guess they probably could, they could add support for this by looking for special function names or whatever, but it would be flaky because they wouldn't know all the possible things. You could add new functions that it wouldn't know about, and things would get kind of buggy. So they have the rule that reactivity will run when there's an assignment. So sometimes you need this kind of numbers equals numbers hacky thing. So if we add, so it's printing out the numbers here, and we click on, I'm gonna make our console smaller. We're gonna add a number, and it's calling add number, and it's pushing onto that list, but it's not re-rendering. It is recomputing. Actually, it's not recomputing sum either, because numbers, it doesn't think numbers have changed. So if we add numbers equals numbers here, then now we can see that it's printing out all the numbers and the sum. Yeah, so the nicer way to do this is to do an immutable update. And if if you've used React for a while, you're familiar with this idea where you don't want to, instead of mutating state, you would create a copy and modify the copy. Svelte lets you do that kind of thing too. So we can do, instead of doing this, we'll say numbers is equal to a new array that's a copy of all the existing numbers plus numbers length plus 1. So all the existing numbers plus this one larger one. And then we don't need to do the equality hack. So oops. If you can find a way to rewrite your code so that it's immutable update, then you can avoid that equality thing. And every now and then you might need this escape hatch, but you should be able to avoid it most of the time. It also mentions that assignments to properties of arrays and objects work the same way as assignments to the values. So if we change, basically if like, I guess you can think of it as if the variable is on the left side of an equal sign, no matter what you're assigning here, then then Svelte will figure it out and know that numbers has changed and re-render. So the simple rule of thumb is the name of the updated variable has to appear on the left-hand side of the assignment. Yep. So if foo is whatever, foo.bar equals baz, then won't update references to object.foo.bar unless you follow it up with object equals object. So this is kind of just saying that, yeah, so if you have some variable, you store it in some other thing, Svelte is not going to like transitively figure out that foo was one of these and everything. It's just going to look at this one line and say, okay, I should update foo. And I guess things that use bar as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. This, I think, is a little bit of a tripping point. I've run into issues with this before, where like things aren't updating and I've had to add the equals or like remember, oh yeah, I have to do it immutably or whatever. So it's a good thing to watch out for. Okay, so props. We've looked at props before, sort of for DOM elements, like we pass that source to the image and stuff. We can also pass props to components, and this works really similarly to React. But Svelte has this export let thing. So we're gonna pass in inside app, we're passing answer is 42 into nested, and then we're rendering out nested here. And nested is saying the answer is undefined because let answer is undefined. We can set this to like equals whatever, and it'll print that out, but it's not getting this prop. So the Svelte way to fix this is to use export. And export let is a little, this is weird. It's like syntactically valid JavaScript, but it's like a thing you probably wouldn't do normally. But this is how you tell Svelte that like this prop is going to be exposed from this component. And you can set defaults. They might explain this later, but you can set defaults to say like default. And then if you're passing in an answer, it will display that answer. But if you get rid of the answer, then it'll use the default one. I think this is pretty nice. It looks a little weird at first maybe, but in practice, this is pretty nice because it gives you all of your kind of like where React would have prop types, or I guess TypeScript, or whatever, to like figure out what component or what props a component needs. Svelte has this export let thing, so you'd have all your export lets defined at the top of your script usually, and then you'd be able to tell looking at this like what things, what props the component needs. Cool. Yeah, they have little warnings about things that are strange, but for the most part, there aren't too many syntax weirdnesses with JavaScript stuff. They've got some special template language stuff that I think we'll get into in a bit. Default values. We already talked about this. Yeah, so if you set this to some other thing, it'll use that, but then the prop will override that value. Okay. Spread props. Okay, so this is also, you're probably familiar with this from React. If you've used React, you can spread an object and it'll pass all those things as props. So here we're just like manually picking out name as package name, version, speed, website. And we can replace all of this with ... package. And that's this variable here. And so name, version, speed, and website all become props that get passed into info. And here's an example of a bunch of export lets and using all those variables here. Cool. All right, go on to the next one. Okay, so here's where we're getting into the template stuff a bit. Yeah, so the next few lessons are going to be about the template syntax. So here we've got ifs, and so Svelte has special template syntax for ifs. And so let's add this in. So to conditionally render some markup, we wrap it in an if block with this special like pound if / if thing. So let's update the component and we'll try this out. So if the user is logged in, we're only going to render the logout button if user.logged in, and we have to close our if to have all this in. And then if user.logged in, if not user logged in, then we'll render the login button / if. Okay, so we've got login. We click login. It toggles it, and now we have logout. Cool. Yeah, so that's pretty simple. Wrap stuff in ifs. And this is also all reactive. So if user changes, you can see that it's re-rendering because user is changing and logged in is changing. All right. Yeah, so we can also do else's. So we've got pound if / if. we can do pound if, and then instead of these things, we can do colon else and render this out. So it works the same way. This is more, yeah, so they have this little block here explaining. So a pound character is always a block opening tag like this pound if. A slash is always the close. So this kind of makes sense, like kind of like a closing tag. And then the colon is a block continuation tag, which is somewhere in the middle, I guess. Okay, we've almost learned all the syntax. Yeah, so this syntax I think takes a little bit of getting used to, but you pretty quickly pick it up. I found that just like my hands don't want to type these things, like brace pound and brace slash. I'm just, my fingers will get used to it, but brace colon, they just feel a little awkward because I think these are things you don't normally type. But once you get used to that, it'll be good. So, all right, multiple conditions can be chained together. So let's try this. So we've got our if, our else, and okay, so in this example, we've got like our else has a nested if, which is another thing you can do, which is cool. But we can instead change this to be an else if. What's the logic doing here? Greater than 10, greater than 5. So we can use else if 5 is greater than x, here to that. And then else, we'll run this one. Okay, let's tab that back in, tab that over there. If you're using an editor like VS Code, there's a good, there's an official Svelte extension that will do, it can run with prettier and everything and format the code for you, which is awesome. This may actually have that too. I just haven't been using it, I suppose. Anyway, this works. So yeah, if, else if, all works. I like that they spell out else if in these examples or in the syntax. I know some languages have like the Ruby or whatever has like else if like that. I think else if is good. Anyway, probably a personal preference thing, but just remember whatever it is and you'll be good, I suppose. Okay, so the next big thing is loops. And we're getting into, we're still in logic. Cool. Okay, so we've got some warnings about cat not being defined. What do we have here? You need to loop over a list of data you can use in each block. So again, it's another block. So we've got a pound and a slash. And we can add it here. So pound each. So each cat as cat. Then we're going to close the block slash each. Hey, that worked out pretty well. So the expression cats in this case can be any array or array-like object. It has to have a length. You can loop over generic iterables with each, I guess, spreading the iterable into an array. And you can also get the index. So if we want cat and I, index here, we call that whatever we want. And then we can do like index +1 is cat name. Yeah, so that works. I think this is cool. So you can do each cat's as, and like instead of this variable here, we can use destructuring and destructure the ID and the name. Because this cat, each one of these is an object that has ID and name. So we can destructure it right here. And this is like kind of like normal ES6, destructuring syntax. And then we can just use name here and wherever ID is, ID over here. Cool. Also notice that it's not compiling if we mess up, like if we have missing variables here, cat is not defined. So this is kind of useful. I mean, more than kind of useful. I think this is great because Svelte won't compile. Like, it won't compile a template if you're using variables that don't exist. So you should at least avoid like easy typos and stuff like that. It's good. So you won't have like just blank things because some variable was undefined or whatever. Awesome. Next one. Okay, keyed each blocks. All right, so by default, when you modify the value of an each block, it's going to add and remove items at the end of the block and update any values that have changed. This might not be what you want. Okay, easier to show than explain. Click the remove first thing button like this. And what is this actually doing? What are we rendering here? We have an array of colors. When we click, we call slice one. So this like removes the first one. Handle clicks calling that. And for each of the things, we render out this thing component, which is some colorful block of text, I suppose. Yeah, so we've got a span with some coloring and whatever. Okay. And current, okay, so current is updated whenever the prop value changes. So whenever current changes here, the color, it's gonna automatically update that here. But the initial, oh, I see. So if initial is fixed on initialization. So the first time, let's actually reload. Go back and then forward again. Reload this. Okay, so each one of these things is rendering two spans. There's initial and current. And so when we hit remove first thing, it takes that first one out of the list. And so the initial stays the same, but its current is changing. So I guess they're trying to demonstrate that, yeah, it's removing and adding items at the end of the block and updating any values that have changed. So it might not match up with how you've changed the array. And so React's answer to this is there's that required key prop on whenever you're rendering an array of things, if like mapping over a list or something. You have to pass a key, and if you don't, React will complain. Svelte will, Svelte figures it out. You don't have to pass a key, but it doesn't always do the right thing, which is the same behavior as React. You just get that warning. Like it will work, but if you reorder things, like if you reorder the indexes, React will maybe render the wrong thing. So to fix this, we can specify a unique identifier. So this is just some special syntax. Thing.id. So in parentheses, you say like what the unique the unique property on this thing is going to be, what the key is going to be. This is your key. And that should be it. So now it knows. Now Svelte can tell like uniquely, can kind of like remember which row is which color. And when you hit remove, it's working the right way. That's cool. Okay. Okay, so we can use any object as the key. Svelte uses a map internally, so in other words, you could do thing instead of thing.id. That's nice. So you could do this thing. And this still works, so you can use an actual object. Using a string or number is generally safer, since it means identity persists without referential equality. For example, when updating with fresh data from an API server. Yeah, so if you were to replace the reference, yeah, you'd want it to know that like it was the same thing, even though the ID stay the same or whatever. Yeah, and I'm not sure actually if this works in React. I think with React they have to be primitive types, like strings and numbers and stuff. But in this case, you can use objects if you want. That's pretty neat. Okay, await blocks. So this is a cool. I think this is a really cool feature. So we have. Let's look at this app here. We're rendering out a promise, which we're going to replace in a second. We hit generate random number. What does it do? It just fails. Failed to generate random number. Oh. Well, let's do the code and then we'll see if it starts working. Maybe this API call is actually failing. I'm not sure. So we can await promises in the HTML, which is really cool. So we have our promise here, get random number. Get random number calls this. It's async, so this is going to be a promise that'll resolve whenever this fetch finishes, or throw an error, which seems to be what it's doing, but okay. So let's do this. So we say pound await. We get that block syntax again, colon to pound, hash to open it, colon in the middle, and slash to end it. So we have a wait promise. And we can render waiting. Waiting. Close the paragraph tag. Tabbing is all weird. Let's just like close the await, and I can fill in the rest of it. So we have a colon then block and a colon catch error block. So let me get rid of this promise thing here. So in the then block, we can say the number is number. And in the catch block, we can say error.message. And we can use like inline styles to make this red. Style is color red. Cool. What did I miss? Number is not defined. Number is number. Oh, then number. Ah, cool. So it's like then data catch error. So this is equivalent to if we had if we written the promise like code, I guess we'd say like promise dot then number. We could like do something with a number, and dot catch. We get the error. Do something with the error, and in like if we wanted to deal with this in React, we need to keep state for whether the promise is done or not, or maybe we could do suspense or something. But this is really nice that we can just in the HTML say, okay, we're going to wait on this promise. This is what we render if it's waiting. This is what we render when it's done. And then if it fails, we get this. And hey, it's working now. It's just, oh, there we go. A bit slow. Cool. Oh, and this code is like not valid here. Just get rid of this. Yeah, awesome. I think this is really nice. So let's see what else we got here. Oh, cool. So there's some shorthand too. I like this about Svelte is that they tend to have a lot of nice little shorthand things where it feels very pragmatic to me where they're just like, well, if you know that this thing can't throw an error, you don't have to write the longhand version of it. You can just write, pound wait promise then value and skip all the rest of the stuff. I think that's pretty cool. Try this. Be like the number is whatever. No, I think we've seen that ours can fail, so we probably want the long form. But see what that'll do. Hey, of course it fails now that I tried. Maybe there's a random failure or something. Await promise, then value. Did I get this wrong? No, it actually looks okay. I don't know. Maybe it's actually throwing an error. Funny now that I put all this code in there. Now it's failing. Okay, I don't know. Maybe the API is not super reliable. Or maybe you can't wait on the same promise twice. Is that true? Let's try 2 of these. I've got 2 waitings. Nope. Nope, that works. That's pretty cool. All right. So if I try this version, wait promise then value. Put an exclamation point there. No. There we go. Okay. So it just randomly fails. I guess that's the point. So we can see the errors. But so it's cool. So we got the shorthand version works and the longhand version works. You can do inside HTML. That's cool. All right. So events. We've already seen like click events. We can use like on colon whatever. So let's try this on mouse move. Handle mouse move. Lowercase m. And then we can move the mouse around and we see it's updating very quickly. I like this about Svelte. It feels very snappy. So this is just demonstrating the event handlers. So I think pretty much all the HTML events are handled. So you can do on colon whatever, on colon click, on mouse move, on mouse up, on key down, key press, all those things. Standard DOM events. You can also declare event handlers in line. So we've been sort of like calling out to functions, and this looks pretty familiar if you're used to React. And you can also write them in line, so you can take the event. What are they doing here? And setting M. So this is cool. So you can set. So we get the event here, and our variable is called M, right? And that's what we're displaying down here. So if we set it inside the event handler, we can just set it directly. X is the event client X. Y is event client Y. And then we see it. It works the same way. This is cool if you're, I think, actually this one's kind of long. I'd probably pull this out. But if you just want to set a single variable, you can do the assignment here and Svelte will pick it up. Quote marks are optional, but they're helpful for syntax highlighting in some environments. Yeah. So I like writing it this way. I'm used to doing this from React, just wrapping things in curly braces because it's a JavaScript expression. But yeah, you can also put the whole thing in quotes if you prefer the quoted style, which is kind of more Angular-ish, I guess. Maybe Vue too. I'm not too familiar with Vue, but so in some frameworks, you might see recommendations to avoid inline event handlers for performance reasons, like this thing here, especially inside loops. But this device doesn't apply to Svelte. The compiler will always do the right thing, whichever form you choose. So that's nice to know. This has been an issue sometimes with. I think in practice, it's actually probably fine most of the time, but people were worried for a long time that like binding event handlers inside props with React was like causing this huge performance problem. And in reality, it's like a very, very microscopic performance problem. But if you do it enough times, it can get slow. And Svelte, you don't have to worry about that at all because the compiler is taking care of it. Okay, so let's get through the event, this events section, and I think we'll stop there because there's a lot more here, and it will take us a while to go through all of it. All right, so DOM event handlers can have modifiers that alter their behavior. This, I think, is also super cool. So we've got some special modifiers that you can put after a pipe. So you say on click pipe, whatever. You can do like prevent default is a common one. You can do stop propagation. You can do passive capture once and self. These are special. Improves scrolling performance on touch or wheel events. Oh, it adds it automatically. Sometimes. Capture fires the handler during the capture phase instead of the bubbling phase. Once only runs it once. And Svelte self is only trigger if event target is the element it's Svelte self. So that might be useful. You can also pipe them together. So we could do like once pipe prevent default. Clicked. Cool. Nice. Yeah, I think this is nice. I think it's pretty common to especially for like submit handlers and stuff, to have to write the, you take the event and you go event.prevent default as your first action. And just being able to do that inline is pretty cool. And it also, I think, keeps it a little more, I guess the locality is better. Like you can tell by looking at the component that like this click is not going to do the default action versus having to follow that up to the function and read it there. Yeah, I think that's pretty nice. All right, let's look at the next one. Component events. So components can also dispatch events. That's neat. So we're going to update inner.svelte. Setup code goes here. We're going to import our create event dispatcher. This is a thing that comes from Svelte. Svelte. We can make our dispatch function. Dispatch is create event dispatcher. And then inside it say hello, we can call dispatch. We'll dispatch a message and pass some data along with it, where the text is hello. And so when you click the button, it's going to call, say hello. Awesome. Are we rendering this thing here? Create event dispatcher is not defined because I need a T there. Okay. Click to say hello. Hello. All right, that works. So it dispatches the event, and then how are we doing that here? So we're using the on. Oh, cool. Yep. So because we're dispatching a thing called message, the event is called message now. And so you can just use on :message. Let's try like on what? Does this work? Should. Yeah, cool. So you can make your own custom messages or custom events. That's pretty nice. It's a good way to like have components passing stuff up to parents or emitting that things happened or whatever. Nice. Create event dispatcher must be called when the component is first instantiated. Can't do it later inside like a set timeout callback or whatever. Interesting. Okay. So when you run this at startup time, it like has to know that it binds it to this component. That makes sense. Okay, so unlike DOM events, component events don't bubble. If you want to listen on some deeply nested component, the intermediate components have to forward it. So I guess a few levels down. So we've got app renders outer, outer renders inner. And so if inner dispatches something, then outer is going to get it, but app won't get it. So we can already see like, yeah, so we're dispatching message from inside inner. Outer is doing nothing with it. And so we're not getting that message event on outer. That sort of makes sense, I guess. Just don't get the bubbling. Okay, so now we can modify this then. Inside outer, we can do our dispatcher. We're just going to copy these lines because they're the same as what we just did. So we're creating the event dispatcher. And then our forward function is going to take an event and dispatch it again. Event.detail. Event.detail, interesting. So event detail must just be like this object here, I suppose. Cool. Okay, and now on message here, we can forward it. And so when we dispatch from inner, when we click the button, it dispatches out to outer and then up to app. That's pretty cool. But yeah, okay, so this is the longhand way to do it. Svelte gives us an equivalent shorthand. I feel like Svelte is really good about little shorthands like this. So, an on message event directive without a value means forward all message events. Oh, that's easy. So inside outer, we can just say on message. And that's going to take the message and forward that up. Now we don't need this. And we don't need, well, any of that, I think. Pretty sure. Hey, nice. That was easy. Yeah, I think that's really cool. So there's like the manual way to do it if you wanted to do something, sort of like do something when that message happens and then forward it up. But there's also this nice shorthand way. So we can forward messages up from children. Nice. All right. Event forwarding works for DOM events too. So we want to get notified of clicks on our custom button, which is this thing here. Ooh, fancy button. To do that, we have to click forward click events up to the parent. So if we just say on click, well, that does it. That makes sense. So if you're making a component that wraps a button or wraps a whatever, like an input or something, and you want to forward stuff out, you can do this on colon event and forward that out. Pretty nice. Okay, now we're on to bindings. I think this is a good stopping point. I'm going to pause here. Hopefully this was fun. Feel free to go to svelte.dev/tutorial and you can play around with these things yourself. There's a ton of them. And let me know if this is helpful. Maybe I can do more of these.